On today's episode, I got to connect across the globe with Thailand-based theater teacher and musician Gersom de Koning. We hope you enjoy this fascinating conversation about generating cinematic style music, the power of connections on YouTube, and using AI to generate cover art. Stay tuned after the episode to hear one of Gersom's original songs and for a chance to score some free music.
Welcome to Creatively Christian, hosted by Brandon Hollingsworth, Andrea Sandefur, and Jake Dobrins. We inspire faithful creatives to thrive by sharing the success stories of others. Join our unique community or get exclusive bonuses by heading to creativelychristian.net. Now, get ready to hear from yet another amazing guest.
Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Creatively Christian. I am your host, Andrea Sandefur, and today I am joined from afar. I will let him tell you where he is, but I'm joined by Gersom de Koning. Did I get it right, Gersom?
Yeah, that's right.
Nailed it. Okay. I tease that I practice names before we go live because I butch them all the time, and his was one I was really worried about. But Gersom, I'm just gonna have you tell everybody a little bit about you, where you live, and a bit about your creative journey and the highlights of your creative work.
Yeah, sure. So I currently live in Bangkok, Thailand, and I am from the Netherlands originally. I kind of grew up in Thailand and Malaysia. My parents are missionaries, doing NGO work, mostly with counseling. So my mom is a shrink, which is why I'm such a messed up child. No, I'm joking. My mom does essentially, she's a trained psychologist, so she does work here. And then my dad supports her mostly administratively. He's actually a trained nurse and management person. So they have a counseling center here. So I grew up here, and then I kind of went back for university in the Netherlands. I pursued the arts already in that. So I do theater by day, and then I do music by night. So today we'll be talking more about my music side. But I feel like both are, I always feel weird calling it this, having come from a missionary family and seeing more traditional ministries in that sense, where you're actually helping people in a physical, tangible way. But in a way, I feel like both theater and music are kind of my ministries. I'm just ministering in a much more abstract way to people, right? Like their emotions, or, well, for theater, it's more direct because I'm actually teaching theater, so it's much more interactive. But yeah, in a way, it is kind of my calling, yeah, I guess you could say. So yeah, I'm based and I've also lived in Singapore before this, Malaysia for a little while, so very multicultural upbringing, which was quite fun.
Yeah, for sure. I've never been to that part of the world. I have a lot of friends that have and love it. They love the cultures and the people there. And so it's definitely another bucket list place for me, for sure. So that is awesome. So I love that. Theater by day, musician by night. And I know, so your style of music, and this is why I kind of wanted to talk to you, is because how you create your music is unique to most that I've talked to. So you're more of like a computer artist or a computer musician. So how did God kind of call you into that realm of computerized music composition? And let's talk about software. Like, what software did you use early on, and what did you find most helpful as you were learning?
So yeah, that's I guess this opens up the longer sort of band story. So my name is Gersom de Koning, but my band or name, I guess, online is Dekoningtan, Tan being my wife's last name. My wife's Singaporean. So we couldn't think of a good name together. So we put Dekoningtan together, both of our last names. Yay, done. And then it started off when YouTube was just kind of blowing up, 2010, 2008, around that time. It was like I was watching some of these YouTube videos, and I'd done music production for church, and I'd been in bands already, since young. So I was the type of kid, okay, school was not that interesting to me. I could pass everything by kind of not studying and doing very minimal effort. And I would spend my time on like bands and worship teams sometimes as well. I did quite a lot of worship leading. And that was my interest. Like so I was fine to just kind of go that way. So I'd get in trouble in school for looking super tired. And it was because I was recording at night in a studio, in a real studio. That was, for me, that was a team that was like, oh my gosh, I'm almost signed, but I wasn't anywhere close to being signed. But I was allowed, because there were my band was good enough that college level sound engineers were like, oh, you have a person to record for free. Yeah, we're recording you in the professional studio. So I kind of got into it through that. And around 2008, so I graduated 2008 to high school. And then my wife joined me in the Netherlands 2009. So probably 2009, 2010, we were watching these YouTube videos. And I went, oh, yeah, I can do that. And I like kind of bragged about it. And I was like, yeah, I could totally do that. And she was like, oh, yeah, prove it. And so I was like, okay, sure, I'll write us an a cappella today. So the first song we did was LOVE by Nat King Cole. And it was just a multi-track a cappella essentially. And I just arranged the whole piece myself. Like, to me, it was logical and easy. But I think it's because I had all that. I mean, singing in church, obviously. My parents' background is originally like Dutch Reformed. So you got really choral style singing that I kind of grew up in. And then they moved into semi-evangelical and then kind of non-denominational right now because of how some of those churches have, strayed, you could say, from the original mission, or, depending on the church they're with. So, but basically that gave me a pretty wide variety of music, right? Starting from like very classical, and then I got piano lessons, all that growing up, to really modern, then hip hop, and I got really into metal in my teens, like early teens, to like even now I'm really into metal. So I think all those music influences were there. And essentially I could just, it got to for me it was very natural and easy to make an a cappella. So she was like, oh wow, that was cool, let's do more. So she has a really lovely voice that like everyone just loves the minute they hear it, and I never had that. I had to work on my voice to get it to the point where people want to hear it. So I was like, okay, cool, you know what, I have this great chick who can sing. That's awesome. So let's just continue. So we did kind of a cappellas for quite a while, and that was moderately successful. I mean, if I had stuck with it better, I lacked I think because things came easy for me when I was younger, in terms of picking up skills, I never learned to like push, like just buckle down and work hard. Whereas I feel like people who it doesn't come as naturally to, they gain that skill way faster. And in the end, I think talent is irrelevant in terms of professional work and actually making it in a scene. I think talent is absolutely useless. What's really useful is grit. So I had no grit back then. I think if I had grit, my YouTube channel could have been way more successful than it was. But I would dip in and out of it. I do a month of it and then like nothing for 5 months. And I think that's just a lack of maturity on my part. And in a sense, in the bigger picture, looking back, it's probably also God working on my ego, in a sense of being like getting me ready for that moment where I had to realize that. So went through college, kind of dipped up and down on that YouTube channel, mostly a cappellas. Then we did some acoustic covers, things like that. And then my second year of college, I had a lecturer who basically gave me a really hard talking to, being like, you're a horrible person in the way that you approach your creative work. You have no ethic, like in the way you're doing it. You're just kind of like, oh, I'm good at this one, I'm going to really play to my strengths only, not work on my weaknesses. And he's like, what does that say about you as a person? And he's like, and you're Christian. He's not, he's a agnostic, I think. And he was like, you're a Christian. Like, what does that say about you as a person of your faith? Like, I know your faith. I'm an art history major. I know all about the church. Don't you have ethic like standards? So he challenged me in that, and that's slowly that journey kind of led me to like first focusing on my degree and finishing up all that stuff and getting really good on that front. And then it was kind of then getting into first working, all that stuff, the normal stages of life that I felt like needed my focus and my attention. And then again, the YouTube channel was up and down, but it was a second thing. And then during COVID, it was kind of like, okay, usually I was doing these big shows because our school is a Christian school here in Bangkok. and we have a 600 seater theater. So it's a massive theater, and I get to do all these projects here, which is great, and it takes up a lot of time. Then during COVID, all that gets shut down, and I kind of told myself, like, look, if you can't make an album now, then you probably just don't have it in you. Like as a challenge to myself, not as a negative self-talk, but I kind of like, if you can't pull it off now, then could you ever? Like, that's a good question. So I was like, okay, I'm going to compile songs that I kind of already have and make a few new ones. I'm going to compile that into just a concept album, like a very rough, okay. The idea was just, okay, it's a cinematic album. And the reason my wife kind of like pulled out of it, she said, like, look, we got little kids right now. Recording live instrumentation is extremely difficult because of how much they shout or talk during the day. And then at nighttime, we don't want to make too much noise. So she said, let's just have you do it. And if you need me for something, pull me in. And once the kids are a little older, we'll reboot me back into it if I feel like it at that point. If not, hey, no big deal. Like, I'll just do backing vocals whenever you need me, which I still use her for ahs and oohs quite often. And so I was like, okay, sure. So I kind of went in. That first concept album was called Fleeting being like the fleeting moments that you lose, kind of representing the fleeting moments I lost that I could have used on that YouTube channel, like a lot of missed opportunities. And the picture is like these two people floating in a void, right? Like in space. Like, and that's kind of the idea of like, time is fleeting. I got to learn to take advantage of that time. And it would roughly put, it was just a dystopian future album. Like, that's the idea. It was kind of cyberpunkish. The game Cyberpunk 2077 came out around that time too. And I like the artwork from it. I like the vibe of cyberpunk. So I was like, I'm just going to create kind of a world where it's a planet, but it's very vague. It's a planet, it's cyberpunk. The songs kind of relate to that roughly. But it wasn't like, I would say creatively, it wasn't the strongest, most cohesive thing. And that's why I say concept album. It's not like, it's not like I did the world building, I would say, to the level that I do for theater, like where I completely make everything. It was me trying to cope with my own creative process. I think that's a good way to put it. So yeah, we have songs that are like In the Club, where it has a lot of my wife's vocals. Like Muse is like that. It's basically like what I imagined might be playing in a cyberpunk club. So it's, very like EDM kind of vibe. And then other songs are very moody and dark and like, okay, the city, the grittiness of the city's there, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So after that Fleeting album, my wife was like, hey, that was really good. You should continue doing this indefinitely. And I'll join you if I feel like it, or if you need me. And then let's just start focusing your YouTube on that first. And around that same time, I got really into building instruments myself. So I have like insomnia pretty badly. I didn't realize I had it till COVID as well, which is funny. I basically asked some people like, hey, how long does it take you to fall asleep? And they're like, oh, 10, 15 minutes. And I was like, oh, it always takes me at least 30 minutes. They're like, oh, that's not normal, man. You should look that up. I was like, to me, it's 30 minutes to an hour and a half. That's my normal. And they're like, that's really long. So I basically realized that it's kind of like my superpower in a way, because I can think of a lot of concepts, and my brain's always active. But when I build instruments, my brain quiets. Like, it's the only time that it's completely silent, and I'm just focusing on the woodwork. So I kind of put those two things into one YouTube channel, and kind of, I think I even told in one of the videos, I mentioned it to the subscribers I did have, like, oh, so it's kind of taking a new direction. Hope you don't mind. We will still do acapellas if I feel like it, or a sea shanty or here or there. It's kind of like, this channel is now just my creative expression, and if you don't like it, sorry.
I love it.
If you do like it, that's great. Please stay. But if you don't, like, I won't be sad. I mean, I'll be sad, but I won't be like angry that you're not into that because you signed up for acapellas and you're only getting them every 20 videos or every 10.
That's awesome.
And so that's kind of the way I went with it. And weirdly, since digging into that niche of cinematic composing and And the reason I use the term cinematic is because technically, if I do put my wife in there with vocals, it's still cinematic. Like you
Hmm.
could have like Regina Spektor has done some amazing stuff for like the Narnia films, you know, like, and it's very vocal heavy. Imogen Heap is another really inspiring artist to me, and she's done the Harry Potter stage version, and it has a lot of her vocals in it as well. So it kind of allows me to do that. And
Hmm.
going into that niche plus instrument building has given me more study subscribers than I thought it would. I thought like these are way too geeky niches, but apparently they're not. Apparently
Apparently not.
that's the thing on YouTube now, is to find your mini niche and
Mm.
just work that niche. And it takes a lot more grit. I do think it takes a lot more study building.
Mm.
And I think, yeah, like some would argue, okay, that's God working that skill in you. And yes, but I think even if I was a non-Christian, it would be a great skill to work on, you know,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
whether that's, you know, God prompting it. And I do think maturing in life is often part of God's plan, right? Like you can grow old and not become wise, or you can become wise. And I think the goal is to become, I think this, for me, this is a wisdom thing that I had to learn.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of where it's at now. So now the Dekoningtan YouTube channel is basically video game ambient cinematic music with instrument building in between. And
That's
sometimes
awesome.
I'll review something, like one of the tools I use. And yeah, my computer is my instrument. Like I am a middling guitarist. I would say I'm decent because I've done a lot of worship leading with the guitar. I'm usually the
Hmm.
chord guy, not the soloist. But I basically play many instruments pretty badly. But but the computer I play very well. So I'm very good at composition. And I use a program called Reason,
Mm.
which is a digital audio workstation, which started off as an instrument. Actually, it started off as a digital synthesizer, so
Okay.
way back when it started, and then they slowly expanded and made it into a digital audio workstation. And then they, I think version 8 or 9, they added like the ability to record audio, but only that late. So before that it was a MIDI tracker, kind of like, if anyone listening has done Commodore or Atari, like those really old beat trackers where you could make uh, really old school game music that were made on those. And it was kind of like that, but then MIDI based. And then they added the vocals, and now it's a full DAW. But some people still use it as a plugin, like as an instrument, because it's the synths
Mm.
in it are very powerful, particularly. And then that's what. So weirdly, there's not a ton of people making cinematic music in Reason specifically. There are some people who do sound design that do use Reason because of that, those synths being so good in it. It allows you to do really weird sounds. And so they use that kind of to a cinematic effect. But on the Reason forums, I've posted a few times, hey, who makes cinematic music? And I get like 4
Crickets.
people. Yeah, four people out of like 14,000 or something that are like, yeah,
Yeah.
most of them do EDM or so it's great for that. And then I've a guy I know who does folk music, but he also says, yeah, he's one of the few people who does folk music on it. And then you get a lot of singer songwriters. The DAW is very much like a mixer or like an amp. So that's why I like it. It's very visual. Everything's got
Mm.
buttons, and some people use virtual instruments like VSTs. And some of those VSTs have those buttons, but when you close the VST, it's hidden. Whereas in Reason, it's all, like a rack. So it's like you're
Nice.
looking at the rack in your, wherever you mix your audio. Usually for me, it was in churches. You get all this hand-me-down gear from other people because a lot of churches
Yes.
take donations. So you've got this amp, and it's a Fender amp, but it's tied to this board, which is a crappy, soundboard. And you have all these wires and plugs everywhere. And you can turn the rack around in Reason and see all the wires. And to me, that really helps my process to like understand this is where this is going. And then to patch things together.
Yeah.
Whereas other DAWs purposefully have that hidden because it looks cleaner, right? Like it
Sure.
looks less cluttered.
But I could
So
see
yeah,
for the certain kind of personality, that would be a really helpful tool, or like it would make more sense to them, especially somebody
yeah,
who has a background in sound, for churches working with a soundboard, or a musician who's never played with a DAW before. Like having something that looks very similar to what they're used to could be really helpful.
yeah. And the nice thing about it too is like I mean, there's some cheaper or free DAWs out there too, but you have to go and install all the instrumentation you want, right? You want a grand piano, you have to find it and install it. Whereas in Reason, like out of the box, it comes with so much just click and play sounds, like, oh, dark plasma, double click. Oh, sounds weird. Like, ooh, cool.
Right.
That sounds interesting.
Cool.
And it even has for free this like sampled instruments as well. I wouldn't say they're that good, as in like now that I've worked with paid for software for cinematic orchestration specifically, but it's as a starting point, it's really great to get started because you have the whole orchestra free, like is there. So, and you could always complement that with other programs, right? But yeah, I think as a visual, for people who are visually based and like to see everything where everything is, it's a great DAW for that. So yeah, I play the computer basically is my instrument.
I love that. I play the computer. So when you were writing all of this music, because I know I draw my inspiration from a lot, like what I'm reading in scripture or what people
Yes.
in my inner circle are experiencing or feeling. Sometimes, just from conversations with somebody, they'll say something that triggers a thought in my mind, and that's kind of where my music flows out of, my lyrics specifically. And then I don't really know where the music flows from sometimes, but I trust the leading of the Holy Spirit. What would you say is your inspiration as you write music?
I feel like it's a mix of pictures and stories mostly.
Mm.
So it's, yeah, how do I put it? It's a good question. For me, I realized, I think as part of that maturing process, that you can't wait for inspiration.
Mm.
And I feel it's interesting. So, I studied art history. So you kind of get like the Greeks, they called it the muses, right? Like speak to you. And I'm not actually, I think a part of me believes that those muses that the Greeks experienced, they were real spiritual entities. And some of them could have been even from God, like at times, like God's messengers. But I think that they can also be from less good places. And I
Mm.
think before Jesus actually officially announced to the spirits when he was walking in the desert, he said, like, you're either for me or against me, like you need to choose. I think before he said that, I think there were maybe even neutral ones who were like, I haven't really picked a side. I'm not anti-God. I'm not, pro God. And I think when he made that statement is when they had to pick, right? So I think that
Mm.
that idea of inspiration has existed a long time because of that. But I think that because God dwells in all of us, I think that inspiration shouldn't be something we rely on to come from outside. I think we can generate it ourselves.
Mm.
So for me, the way I generate it, and so this might be very helpful for people who are creatively stuck, is I teach a lot of improv for my theater part. So this comes from that influence. If I have no ideas, I give myself limitations because limitations help you to do more, actually. So you could say, okay, all I'm going to do for tonight is I'm just going to make 4 chords on a piano. And this song is only allowed to have a piano and a guitar. That's all. And that limitation, you might break that rule later, but that's not what you're thinking about. You're just thinking about the limitation. So you're like, okay, I'm forcing myself to write something, even though I think it's going to be terrible. And then you just close it. When you're done, you save. You don't allow the critic inside you to say anything. You just like, okay, that was done. I did my job. So I think that's one thing that I definitely do is like but to me now, because I've done that so long, it's not, I don't have to do the baby steps anymore. It's just an instinct. I can turn it on and off, especially since having kids. I only have this much time. I might as well use it, right?
Right. Go for it. Go, go,
Yeah,
go.
exactly. Go. I have 1 hour. So yesterday, that's an example. I was carrying my baby to sleep. She's not feeling so well. So then while I was carrying her, I was like, oh, hey, there's a riff. Okay, it should be on an oboe. Okay, cool. So I'm going to put that riff in an oboe when I get upstairs. And then I had to carry her to sleep 2 or 3 more times. So I think the riff changed because I couldn't quite remember it exactly. But oh well, at least I got that down. So that's an example of it kind of striking, because my mind is idle, and so something comes in. But there's other times I sit down and I just think in a picture. So I just think, okay, so a song that I've just been working on. So I sampled a flute that I found in the Netherlands. So my parents had gone to a secondhand shop, bought a really probably homemade flute from someone. And I found it in a drawer, and I went to the forest with it, and I was playing it in the forest, and I sampled every note, right, one by one, and I'm putting that into the computer to make a playable instrument, because I can't play flute. Well, not well. So if I put it into a keyboard, I can play that flute as if I'm a maestro, right? So I sampled the whole flute, and my goal was okay, I need to show off that this is a nice sounding flute, so that when people watch the YouTube video, they go and download that file and use that flute. That's for free, right? So that's one. But two, I imagined a picture. Okay, it's a tavern scene, and it's in a fantasy kind of D&D setting. What music would be playing in the background of that scene? So, and it needs the flute. So that those are already limitations I put on myself. It needs the flute. What music is playing? So I imagined something quite happy. So I just started playing, okay, what's kind of a major scale kind of little riff that they can play? So I just put that together, do, 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 and that's okay. All medieval songs have tambourines. I'm going to put in a tambourine. And it's essentially like a lot of times we criticize ourselves, and I don't think that part is from God. I do think healthy constructive criticism can be very godly, and it often comes from others. Actually, it doesn't come from ourselves. Yeah. Someone who goes, hey, you could change this, change that, clean that up a little. But I think that natural self-critic, when I teach improv, I divide it into kind of a Freudian concept. There's your id, which is like the uncontrollable inner child that just wants to, run around naked. It's essentially, right? Like has no self-control. And there's your ego and your super ego. But your super ego is like a extremely strict school mistress or master who's just like punishing you to conform to social norms. You're not good enough. You need to change this. And your ego is the one who has to balance those two out, right? Because we do have needs like food. When we're hungry, we should go eat. That's your id saying that. It's not your super ego, but your super ego would say, but if you eat too much, you're going to get fat, and so your ego has to balance out those two things. And when you're being creative, you need to learn to silence the super ego and to let the id talk a little bit, but not too much, because then you'll just become one of those drug addicted artists, and you're going to go crazy. So your ego has to balance those two. And I think I think like where the best leading comes in terms of like constructive criticism for yourself is from that point, right? Where you're balancing those two sides of yourself, and you're not being too critical. So like, yeah, does every medieval song have a tambourine? Yes. Is that stereotypical? Yes. However, what will my listeners expect to hear? A tambourine. So should I be like, oh, I should be edgy and put in a different instrument? No, I should put in the tambourine. It's the most logical choice. There's a Bible verse that I teach. Whenever I teach improv, I actually link it to a Bible verse, which is from Ecclesiastes. There's nothing new under the sun. Mm-hmm. And my students often chuckle because I read them the whole passage and they're like, this is so depressing. And I'm like, yeah, but it also lowers the bar for you. You don't need to be perfect. If you do something that's been done before, you've still made it different. And they're like, how have I made it different? I was like, because it's you. You're doing it, and you're weird. You're different. You're not the same as other people. So you've brought that message back in a different way. You've changed it just by being, and they're like, oh yeah, that's true. It does take the pressure off. And that relaxes you into, I think, creating better stuff. And particularly for cinematic music, I mean, you're trying to appeal to the typical emotions sometimes. And every so often a song pops up that isn't like that, right? Like that's more unique or edgy. Right. But often that happens without you trying, I think. Like it doesn't happen by you trying to be edgy. Then you end up being fake or So that was a long answer to
No, it's so good. I enjoyed so much, especially like if we feel stuck, like, giving us ideas of like what to do, and that idea of limitations, just keeping it simple, not trying to bite off a full score when we can just focus in on something simple, can help us pave the way.
Yeah, you get one riff and then you leave it for a week or two, and then you get back to it. You're like, oh, I know what to do now. But also like the imagery, I think is really powerful for me. I
Mm.
follow on Instagram artist accounts that just make images I like, and I follow art history accounts. And I'll look at the picture and be like, oh, that's such a nice picture. I wonder what music would go with that.
Oh, nice.
And I feel like, well, some Christians I've met, they feel a need that their music has to be Christian sounding, as in like literal Christian, as in like it needs to refer to God directly. And I'm like, hey guys, read The Lord of the Rings, read C.S. Lewis, and you can use allegories or parables to explore themes, and you don't need to directly, like, you can. Some of the most healing music for me as a teenager was the non-Christian metal bands I listened to, because they
Mm.
channeled my pain and put it somewhere useful rather than me taking it out on other people. And you'd think, oh, but those bands were definitely not, they were writing from a place of anger and grief, and they weren't in a good place, and they weren't definitely not Christian. Yes, but it helped me channel it still had a good effect. And I think, like, and interestingly enough, one of those bands, the guitarist did become Christian later. So
It helped him too.
yeah, it did. It helped him in the end. I mean, it took literally Jesus tapping him on the shoulder physically. He had to feel God's hand on him to finally change.
Mm.
But it's incredible, like, how cathartic music and your art can be, and you don't realize it's having that cathartic effect. And sometimes, I mean, if the person's like me, usually if there's a direct God reference that's too on the nose, it will actually turn me off of that song. I'll be like, oh, well, it's a worship song, like,
Right.
oh, I must be, I have to be godly now as I listen to it. Whereas if it's a song about general, like POD does this really well. They're a rap rock band, and POD has some songs that are very, reference God directly, and some that don't at all.
Right.
And they can have such a high impact because
Yeah.
you're just thinking about the subject matter that they're talking about. They're talking about death, or they're talking about sadness, and you're just relating to that, and it's cathartic for you as a listener. So yeah, I think if you get stuck, images, parables, or little stories in your head that you can like
Mm-hmm.
find to like, and the audience doesn't even have to get the same story from it that you intended. It can be roughly the same,
Yeah.
Yeah, I have one song that has, to me, it's a gnome in a workshop working on something. And other people said, oh, I just thought it's a weird human scientist. They don't know it's a gnome. They just think it's a guy with a weird voice. I'm like, yeah, potato, potato.
They got out of it what they got out of it.
Yeah, and
And
that's fine.
yeah,
Like,
that's awesome. Well, I love how you talk so much about like imagery and stuff because I know you have kind of a really cool way that you go about developing the pictures for your artwork and like your cover
yeah.
art and for your videos. So, how do you go about getting most of those?
Yes. So I for my first album, I actually hired a friend of mine to do the album artwork. And I do recommend that if you're doing a bigger project uh like an album, something that's more
Hmm.
cohesive, I think hiring an artist is great. A, because you're supporting the other artist, but B, because I think you'll get more directly what you envision in your head when you talk to a real human being. But if you need to be cheap and you're doing singles or something like that, a much more efficient way to get album artwork is using AI art. So there's programs like DALI, which you have to sign up for, and there's a little waiting time before you get let into the project. But other ones are like Midjourney is on Discord. So if you're already on Discord, you can have someone in your Discord group install it into your Discord. And what you do on those, and then let's see, there's DALI, Midjourney, and there's Stable Diffusion. Another one's called Stable Diffusion. That one's free. You can just use it online. What these things do, you can set the dimensions of your artwork, and then you type in a prompt for it to imagine. So for me, for one recently that I'll probably share at the end of this this podcast, the idea that popped into my mind when I first thought of the initial opening riff was just lightning strikes the upper city. And all I imagined was a cathedral getting hit by lightning. Adding as the story progressed in my mind, there was also a weird shadowy figure who's running on the rooftop stealing something from someone. But that's really where the story ends. Like, I never ended the story in my mind. It's just that imagery, and it's raining and it's dark. So I typed in lightning strikes the upper city in the prompt. And the AI just is like, okay, city, lightning. Okay, here's a couple images. Okay, so then I thought, okay, these worked, but they were a little too modern looking. They looked kind of industrial. So it's like, okay, let me try again. Lightning strikes the upper city, cathedral, Gothic architecture, fantasy, adventure, high photorealism. Okay, then it started popping up images, and it gives you images to choose from, and you can choose to embellish an image or just make it bigger, right? So that the resolution size works. Now, some of these AI programs, they don't allow you to do full resolution unless you pay. But then in handy comes something called a AI upscaler, image rescaler. So basically, then you can take that image, the small size one, you can go to Google and type in image rescaler, and there's free ones as well. Like, there's ones again where you pay, but there's free ones, and you say, okay, it's right now it's 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. I'd like it to be 3,000 by 3,000, so times 3, and it will increase the size for you, and it will AI do that. So it actually studies the picture to make sure it smoothly opens up the image, and you get a high resolution image. You can do this on photos too, like take a photo of Will Smith and low quality photo, and it will make it look, you can tell a little bit on the lines of faces, particularly that there's a bit of editing done, like it looks a little photoshopped, but it's not bad enough. Like, when you look at a thumbnail, no one's going to notice. It's only when they blow the image up big. So I've done that one. I've done another one, Space Carnival. I literally like typed in a prompt imagining the image. Okay, there's a carnival spaceship. It's a spaceship, but it's also like a circus carnival tent. And that one did, the image was so good. So then what I did was, for YouTube, I take the album image and then I edit it and I animate it, which obviously that takes a lot more studying and skill to do. But I've done a lot of video editing because #drama teacher, right? Like you end up doing a lot of these things. So that one, the image was so powerful that when I posted it, and Midjourney, I think, was just kind of becoming a little bigger at that time, so people were learning about Midjourney. I somehow freakishly got 1,600 views on that video. It's an original piece. Most original pieces, even for big name artists, get way less views than their covers for YouTube artists, right? So I was like, oh, 1,600 views. Oh, cool. And the image just speaks really well. There's a little girl standing in the middle, and then it looks like space is just above the stars, and there's this massive looming kind of creepy circus spaceship coming down. And below you can see the little tents of vendors and stuff. And it's a very beautiful image. And I think that's why people click on it. They're like, oh, that's a cool image. That looks vibey. What's that song about, And so you can create artwork that actually matches the vibe of your song. And one of my friends is a poet, a Christian poet, and he's now using those images for his poetry. So,
Nice.
if it's one about, the pasture, like God leads me to green pastures, right? He will do a pasture image, but it will be, for example, watercolor. He'll type in watercolor palette is pink and purple to kind of give it a little bit more flavor and make it more interesting than just a picture of a green pasture. And then he's able to make really cool images. And he's even used one of them in a sermon now that he gave, because he's a pastor as well. And it's just nice to have those images. And it's a great way to think of like singles or short-term material that doesn't require as much in-depth analysis, maybe. Though I've watched some YouTube videos, and these guys go really deep into how to like write the right prompt and how to really get it exactly the way you want it to be. And in a way, I feel mixed about it, because you're taking away work from digital artists, but in a way, it's like we can't do that for every release. Like, in the way that music has moved, is like they expect you to release more singles and less albums. So we couldn't do that for every single, but we can do it for albums. So my goal is to try and use it for albums. Like, okay, I'm still going to try and support, but every time I do a single, I'll have a specific image for each song that's separate to the album image.
That's really cool. And I like how many prompts you can put in there to really kind of start narrowing it down and nail it down. So we'll have to link some of those like different links to different websites where they can kind of connect with some of those. I think that's really great. I think that'd be kind of fun for anybody, posting anything that wants to have an image to maybe try that out. So
Yeah, yeah. And my recommendation is that if you're using free credits, don't use them all in one go because it gets really fun to keep creating images.
sure.
Eventually, I was doing things like the girl with the pearl earring, but she's Asian. Just to see what it looks like. Oh no, I spent all my free credits, so now they want me to pay.
That's
Because some of them are
funny.
completely free, but other ones they only give you a certain amount
A
free
certain amount. Got
because
it.
it takes processing power of the computers to do it. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so I know you recently entered into kind of a collaboration project. Can you tell our listeners a bit about what that project is and how you got connected with that person?
yeah, so collaboration project that I'm kind of working on right now is there is a guy called the Viking Woodsmith who's a YouTube guy as well, small channel like me. He makes stuff out of wood, essentially, like just weird,
Oh.
cool Viking stuff, loosely Viking themed stuff. And he made this thing called the log lyre, and he kind of joked that it's the last one in the world. Obviously, a literal log lyre has never really existed because it's not very practical to take with you. If you are a bard in the Viking Age, you wouldn't carry around a log, right? But what he did was he had this idea like, okay, like let's make a lyre, but it's a bass, like bass guitar strings, and it's huge. So he made that, and I said to him, hey, would you mind sampling it for me, each string one by one, and we'll turn it into a keyboard instrument, and it's a bit of a like a niche instrument that's just kind of cool. Like you add it's not really, you wouldn't probably use it as a main instrument, but you definitely use it as like backing up something or as like an interesting extra bit where people are like, what instrument's that? That sounds like a bass guitar, but
Yeah.
it's not a bass guitar. So anyway, he went and recorded all the samples, and then I'm going to put them together into a digitally playable instrument. So that involves a little bit of programming skills, but really not that much. It's quite easy to learn. And you basically tell the computer, okay, this note is played here on the piano, and here's the file. And then you package that, and then you can release it to people for free. And of course he's thrilled about it too, because if he ever loses the log lyre, or if he ever has to rebuild it into something else, he now
Mm.
has a keepsake digitally freely available online, so he can always go and download it whenever he wants. And it gets his name out there more because for like some of my other instruments that I've sampled have gotten over 1,000 downloads already. I mean, I guess for free stuff, right? You'd hope that you get something, but I was surprised to get to 1,000 for some of them, because I was like, oh, who would want this? But like apparently people do, and they use it as like sonic textures in their music, which is quite fun. How I connected with him was he popped up on my algorithm because I was going into the instrument making phase where I was
Mm.
looking up a lot of stuff about people who make stuff at home, like flutes or whatever. And then his video popped up of him making I think it was a different instrument. And that one he did, and it was like semi-successful, as in it didn't sound quite the way he wanted it to, but it was fun for him to like try. And then he went and did the log lyre later, and I wrote to him like, hey, I have this idea. Do you want to do it? And so yeah, so that one, I first have to release my little flute video and stuff. So probably the end of the year is when I'd get around to doing the log lyre video, because I usually make a whole video to show the process of how you sample it and how you put everything together.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the first one that's coming up. And then another interesting collaboration. It's not really a collaboration as much as it's an inspiration. There's a guy who wrote a book called he wrote 3 books: Journey, Quest, and there's one other one. Anyway, I'm taking the first of his books. It's basically they're books that have no text, just images that he drew, and I'm composing an album for the whole book. So as you read it, I don't know if you've seen The Snowman from the 1980s. There's a British piece called The Snowman. It's based off a book as well, and it's about a little boy and his snowman comes to life, and he goes and visits Santa and stuff with all the other snowmen. And it's just music. There's no talking in the whole thing. So kind of inspired by that, I wanted to do all the pages of the book in music. So if someone's reading, they could just be listening to the music as it goes and
That
turning
is
the
so
page for each.
cool.
Yeah, super fun. So for that one, it's not officially a collaboration because he's the author. I did reach out and say like, hey, would that be okay? And he said, well, technically the publisher doesn't allow you to publish materials from my book, but at the same time it's promotion for the publisher. So sometimes they just let people do it. So he said, it's not, it's up to you. If you have to take it down, I'm sorry. And I said like, well, I keep the music rights would be completely mine. So if
Right.
I have to upload it without the images, I can just tell people it's this book,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
buy it, and then just upload a probably an AI generated image that looks similar in style at least, and then I could just make like, okay, this is a similar style album cover, but here you should go buy the book. It's supposed to be read with this book. So that those are kind of two that I'm working on. Yeah, the book is called Journey by Aaron Becker. It's a really beautiful. He does really beautiful artwork.
That is
Great
so
kids.
fun. Very, very fun. Those are really unique. Again, you do some really unique things, and I love how you just kind of, seeing who kind of weaves into your circle of, who God puts in your path and,
Yeah,
serving each other and kind of elaborating on each other's work. That's very cool. Very, very
it's
neat.
it's it's super fun. I feel like that's a good. I mean, I'm in the privileged position of doing what I love during the day and then also getting to do what I love during the night. And I know some
Hmm.
people aren't in that boat, but I would say if you are not in that boat and you have a day job that you're maybe like, it's okay. And then at night, maybe you're doing your creative work. First of all, I feel like feel validated that whatever time you do the work, it's still creative work. Like you should still consider yourself to be trying to be a creative professional, even if you're not professionally, if you're not getting paid yet, but also like realize that being an amateur is not bad, as in like the word amateur actually just means to love. You are a lover of that craft, so view yourself as like, I am passionate about this craft and that's why I'm working on it, and that's just as valid as if I'm earning money. Like money is a very easy idol, and it's one that I've fallen for many times to get distracted by, and to realize like, I mean, it's lovely if we get paid for our work in the end. Yes. And I agree that we should be advocating for getting paid. Definitely, especially within the church. Like, I feel like we churches have money, but we need to also put it towards artists. Shouldn't always take advantage of the creatives in our industry. But if you're not getting paid for it, it's still very valid to be doing such work. And sometimes those accidental meetings lead to paid work. So I'm in a Christian game creators group, like video games. And most of the time, I don't really like much of the content being posted in that group because a lot of the people in the group are very obsessed with making biblical games. Like it's literally biblically inspired, which to me as a gamer myself, I'm like, oh, that's not that interesting. I can just read the Bible, like why? But I know there is an audience for it and there is people who would be into that. So I'm like, oh, cool, interesting, but not that keen on it. But one time somebody popped in there and he's in California. He actually makes board games. And I reached out and was like, hey, would you like a soundtrack for your game? Even though it's a board game. He was like, yes. And he did pay for that. And his board game's not coming out till next year, but like it's about the witch hunts in Germany that Christians did to innocent women, because those women weren't actually witches. They were just brewing beer or other, normal
Right.
jobs. And so he had me make a very, very dark soundtrack for that because he was like, hey, I want to point out to people, I want them to think while they're playing the game, like, why did people do this? Why did they do such evil things to each other in the name of God? Like he wanted them to reflect on that. So sometimes those things that, that group, I usually just read it kind of passively thinking, oh, that's a fun project. Oh, that's interesting. But then occasionally something will pop up and it's often in your peripheral that these little opportunities pop up that I think you can take and just take them. What do you have to lose, right? Like some time, but you'd be probably being creative during that time anyway. So take the opportunities that you can get, especially if you're starting out. Like take every opportunity, and then maybe after about 6 months or a year of doing that, you can start to say, okay, now I only want to take creative paid opportunities. You can start to be more picky. But initially, yeah, you want to get some of that experience under your belt and get some people that like you and can leave you positive feedback or reviews or something like that. So
Yeah, it's good experience, and it's good to kind of start to dabble in various things and figure out what you even enjoy doing too. Yeah. Well, Gershom, we should probably wrap things up
yeah.
eventually. I feel like we could talk to you all day because it's so interesting what you get to do.
Thank you. Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, but I know you live a really busy life. And I think what's fascinating to me is how much you actually accomplish. Being a teacher by day and then a musician by night. I know you have the insomnia thing, but it
It
feels
helps.
like you have so much energy and you have such a passion to do what you do. So I don't know, how do you or what do you feel like energizes you, keeps you going like that?
I think um, kind of a mantra that somebody recently on YouTube, this guy who's, I guess, a self-help coach person, he said something interesting, which I was like, oh, this is maybe how I live my life without realizing, like the way he kind of put it in words for me. He said, like, energy is an interesting thing. It is something that you expend to get more of. So if you choose, and there's nothing wrong with relaxing and, finding ways to relax. I think that's great to do that and to be intentional about how you relax. But if you're choosing to sit down and be a couch potato for 2 hours every day, your body will train itself to expend that amount of energy every day. Whereas if you were to say, look, I like doing that. And for me, I think as my kids grow older, having an hour of TV time with them will probably become part of my routine, because for my family growing up, we would watch The Simpsons or Little House on the Prairie as like a family activity. So I think it can be a very positive force. So I'm not saying no media, don't waste your time. I'm saying, like, think actively about what you're spending your energy on and what you're training your body to do.
Mm.
I've always been known as an energetic person since young, but I don't think that was, I think I view energy spent as well spent. And then when you spend that, you end up getting it back. So it's actually, your body is an amazing self-replicating tool, right? It will give you the energy that you need. So the first week of jogging, for example, is very hard. Your whole body hurts. But after you've done a week, then the next week is a little easier. And the next week, by the third week, you have to increase your challenge level, or your muscles are so used to it, right? Then the
Right.
same goes for creativity. It's a muscle that you can train to do what you want it to do. And I think that's, for me, my biggest slump in YouTube. And I think the reason is I had two things attached to it. Ego was number one. Like, it had to get this many views or whatever to be considered valid. So that was a myth or a lie that you could say the Satan puts on us. I feel like, like, I like saying it, the Satan, because if you translate it to Hebrew, it means the accuser, right? So
Mm.
you can be the Satan to yourself. You can accuse yourself of things. So for me, it was, if I don't get that validation, it's not good enough. That was one part. But the second part was from Dutch culture. Dutch people are very regimented in their time, and which is a good and a bad thing. We have great paternity leave. That's a result of that, right? Our dads get tons of time off to spend with their children. That's awesome. That's because we are so regimented. But the bad side of it is, it can lead to thinking like, oh, well, I've done my work, my day job now. I'm tired now. I should rest. I need to rest. I will burn out.
Mm.
We have one of the highest rates of burnout, like, I think worldwide. On the one hand, it's great because it means we're able to admit that we're burnt out, right? So there's both a good and a bad side. But on the other side, it's like, if we study human psychology, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when all our basic needs are met, we will create problems for ourselves. That's the fall of man, right? That's our sinful nature. So we will turn away even good things because we're too tired or burnt out to do it. But those good things might be the exact thing that replenishes us. And so for me, it was an escape to video games. Video games can be great for me. For my drama lessons, they're fantastic. They give me ideas, inspiration. But I would sometimes go into it so long, 3 or 4 hours, is it really useful then anymore? Like an hour, yeah, an hour or two. I play it with my kids an hour or two, that's great. But if it's sucking up too much time, you can question, is this a useful expenditure of my energy? And then when I realized that, I started viewing my creative things as replenishing my creative energy. So I'm spending the creative energy because it's going to loop back to me, and it's true, it works. So if you're doubting what I'm saying, it works. Okay, so I managed to be a writer for several projects at the same time, like several stories at the same time, and do my day job well, and do the music all at the same time, and be a very present father. So like all those things at the same time. And I realized what would happen to me is at night, I get really sleepy around the time that I'm putting my kids to bed, and I just relax. I'd use that time because my son has insomnia too, right? He's 3-year-old insomnia, which means I have to lie with him for ages, just waiting. And I realized, like, oh, I'm so sleepy. I'm just going to relax now because I might as well. And then after a while, I'd be like, oh, he's asleep. Okay, cool. I can get up now. Sometimes I wouldn't. I just go to sleep too. But depends on, I'm really listening to my body. And then I go, oh, no, I have energy. And I get up and I find that I have like a third wind of energy. And interestingly enough, medieval people back in the day understood this concept very well. They would wake up in the middle of the night and do stuff. And they would sleep in sections, right? Because they had to go to sleep when it went dark, and they didn't want to use too much candlelight. So, and that's where this idea of the third wind comes from. The first wind is when you wake up and you've started going. The second wind is after your lunch dip, right? You feel, and you just before dinner, you have another energy burst. And then after dinner, you're supposed to relax. And then after that, you can still have more energy. But you create that opportunity and that energy for yourself. I think changing my mindset about not viewing my creative stuff as work, but viewing it as God designed me to do this. So why am I not doing it? Like, yeah. And I think that goes for everyone. And that's how you can get those hours and hours in. Interestingly, the people I've met who don't pursue creative work professionally, sometimes do better at this than creative professionals, because we've tied our work and our identity to it. Engineers I know who are crazy good on the guitar, and they're like, yeah, I just practice 2 hours a day. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, you practice that long? And they're like, yeah, I love it. Why would I not do that? And I think like having that mentality switch, a lot of Singaporeans I met, they have to work so hard in their country, but they have a really good way about like managing okay, I have to work a lot, but I can still have fun and have energy to have fun, and I can still have energy for my family. So they prioritize those two things so well, even though they work way longer hours than me,
Wow.
And that was really inspirational. And like, okay, it's a mindset switch, and once you practice that muscle, I feel like it self-replicates itself, and you end up feeling able to be inspired almost all the time. That doesn't mean you have to be inspired all the time. For those people who are going to be perfectionists about it, you will know, your body will tell you when you really need to rest, and you should just go rest.
Yeah.
Sleep on it. But many times training that muscle is just wonderful.
That's really cool. I like the jogging analogy. That makes a lot of sense, that, the first week it might feel really, really hard and painful. That you're almost expending more energy than you have, but over time, I could see it being built as like a muscle, and you almost craving it more over time.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Okay, well, as we wrap up, I know you mentioned your YouTube channel, and we will make sure to link people there. How else could people connect with you online?
Well, yeah, my YouTube channel is probably the best one.
Okay.
On Spotify is another great one if you just want to listen to purely the songs. You don't care about instrument building, that kind of stuff, or the process behind it. Yeah, the songs are great. I mean, I often say my music, because it's largely instrumental, is great for background music. Listening to it while working on things. There's quite a rhythm to it. There will be slower songs and faster songs, so it kind of helps you to get a workflow as well, where you work a little slower, then you work a little faster. So Spotify would be another one. Same name, Dekoningtan, on there. I am on Twitter, but I don't use it that much.
You don't tweet much.
I tweet every so often. I go in spurts,
Yeah.
And otherwise, like I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, Dekoningtan Music, or Dekoningtan, one of those two. So yeah, those could be other ones. But yeah, my main focus is really the YouTube and the Spotify.
Awesome. Okay. Well, we will link everybody there so they can connect with you
Thank
and
you.
collaborate if they want to. It sounds like,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, it would be really fun. I look forward to introducing you to our audience through this show. I think this will be really fun just to get to know you and kind of follow along what you're doing.
Yeah. And if they ever have like follow-up questions or stuff, I mean,
Yeah,
I do creativity coaching kind of for a living. So if they ever
nice.
wanted to follow up on just that, I'd probably be happy to do that kind of stuff. I've done it before for like workshops. So,
Very
I
good.
put something together. It's quite fun for me. Like it's like I'm a teacher, so we like to talk about stuff.
You were a teacher for sure. You're in a good profession, aren't you? I love it. Well, I would love to pray for you as we close.
That
And
would be
then
great. Thank you.
Gershom is actually going to share a song, one of his songs with us at the end of the episode. We're going to tag that on to this episode, but he gets to share a little bit about it before we hear that. But let's go to prayer. And I would just like to pray for you and your family and what you're up to. So
Yep.
let's
Super.
pray. Oh, Father God, thank you so much for this time with Gershom, that we can connect across the world. I think it's closer over the Pacific than it is the Atlantic from where I'm at here in Alaska. And I just thank you that this technology makes that possible. So thank you for that. And Lord, thank you for everything that you've called Gershom to do, and how you've created him uniquely to create what he does. The music that is so visual, focused on the visual and how he reflects on that. And I just thank you for his love for teaching and inspiring others to create as well, and collaborations. And I just thank you so much for how he is an example of how he spends his time, his creative time and efforts, and what he taught us today. Lord, just bless him and his family all the way over there in Thailand. And I just pray that as his kids grow and learn, that they might be inspired and encouraged in their own creativity by watching their dad. And we just thank you again for the beauty that it is to be your creative people. Bless our work, and may it be for your glory, Lord. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So what song are you going to have us enjoy here at the end?
So yeah, the song is called Lightning Strikes the Upper City. I was talking about it a little bit before. It's essentially a little bit faster paced song, and all I imagined was somebody running across the rooftop, and then behind them lightning strikes. Whether the lightning gets struck by them, maybe they're a magician, I don't know, or if it's purely coincidence, right? Like, and they're obviously running away from something, and specifically the upper city is I've always liked this idea of in a lot of novels where they show like, okay, this is what the world could be like. I'm always a little scared by the idea of an upper city and a lower city, and if we see some cities nowadays, it seems to be heading to that in certain cities where you'll really have really poor districts and really rich districts. But I imagine this a little bit more in a fantasy setting. So yeah, who is this shadowy figure coming down from the upper city, having probably stolen something or done something up there? We don't know exactly what they did. And why are they headed down to another part? Like, so that's kind of the questions I had as I was moving into it, and that's it. The rest of the story is for the audience to fill in for themselves as they listen. Is he sad because he's escaping something, or is it a she? We don't even know. It's a cloaked figure, right? So yeah, as they listen to it and as the song like moves, they can make their own story and see how it speaks to them essentially.
I love it. Okay, well, everybody enjoy. And thank you so much for being a guest with us, Gershom. It was really great to meet you and get to know you. Absolutely.
All right. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening today. And guess what? If you become one of the first 11 paid subscribers of the Creatively Christian podcast, you can download Gersom's song for free and take advantage of other subscriber-only resources. Visit creativelychristian.net to get connected. And thank you so much for supporting the show. To see the other resources mentioned in today's episode, head over to creativelychristian.net/Gersom.
Thank you so much for listening. Please rate, review, and share this episode so we, in turn, can bless even more people. Creatively Christian is a product of Theophany Media. You can find out more at theophanymedia.com. The show is hosted by Brandon Hollingsworth, Andrea Sandefur, and Jake Dobrins. Our logo is by Bill Brooks. Bill Brooks and Andrea Sandefur did our theme music, and Jake Dobrins produces and edits the show. God bless you, and keep on creating.